Okay.
I have his PowerPoint as well.
Okay. Okay, there we are.
Share, start share. Doctor, can you hear us? You're on mute. So Gail, do you want to get started?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody.
Hang on. Gail's going to introduce you, Dr. O.
Yeah.
Okay. You're muted, Gail.
I am so sorry. Technology is not one of my greatest points here, but I just want to welcome each and every one of you, school counselors, family and friends from Buffalo to Brooklyn. Thank you. This is our second webinar, and I have this wonderful doctor who will be speaking about depression. I just want to give a shout out to my students of class 630. Welcome. I'll see you guys after our webinar. A shout out to, there's a couple of people on here, Dr. Kathy Corbett, Sharon Usher, part of our professional development team. Without further ado, I am going to have Dr. O take it away. As you can see, his resume is there. Bob sent that to you earlier. It's a lengthy resume. His patients refer to him as Dr. O, so do I. He's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He attended Albert Einstein School of Medicine in Montefiore, Bronx. He's associate professor at psychiatry medicine. He's had lots of years of experience, and he believes process greater depth, accuracy, and utility. Dr. O, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is doing very well. I thank the New York State School Counselor Association for inviting me for this webinar. Thank you very much. My Dr. Oshuntoku and Gail has so eloquently described, presented, giving the introduction. So you could call me Dr. Oshuntoku, call me Dr. O. But the topic before me today is depression in youths, a great pretender. And one of the motivations for me choosing this topic today has to do with what I've seen over the last 20 years of practice. Over the last 20 years of practice. When a child is suffering from depression, this can have significant impact on the entire family. The emotional atmosphere is different within the family, which becomes extremely strained. The depression can create a sense of sadness, worry, and frustration among family members. There may be an overall decrease in the family's sense of well-being. There are significant communication challenges because the depressed children often withdraw with, because they don't know how to express their emotions. So the tendency is to withdraw. from family interactions. And this makes it very difficult for other family members to understand what the child is going through. So one of the reasons why I brought this topic is to open a conversation in the school so that we can all have an open and honest form of communication, which I think should start from school, especially if we have a high index of suspicion, to pick such cases up in the school. Also, parents may experience feelings of guilt, confusion, helplessness when their child is depressed. They may question their parenting skills, and they feel responsible for the child's condition. And this also leads to increased parental stress and anxiety. This affects families' routines and activities. And the most important thing is the siblings who are not depressed. They are the forgotten siblings. And they are also affected by the depressed child within the family. And they experience a range of emotions such as concern, confusion, even neglect.
Dr. O, you'll tell me when to change the slides, right?
Okay, I will.
Okay.
And because the parents are, they are significantly focused on these depressed kids, and they just neglect the other kids who are not suffering. It's like a crime to be normal when a kid is in the family and is depressed. So what this causes in the family is an overall increased stress levels. Living with a depressed child makes the family depressed. It makes the parents depressed. And their concerns are it's heightened, and they don't know what to do. And it's just a lot of chaos. So this is a situation in which family can see that the child is depressed. But what about if the family doesn't know that the child is depressed? Because most of the time, what we have in depressed youths is they don't present like adults. They are withdrawn. They just come up with some of their symptoms, which are not like adult symptoms. And they may not be able to have the right words to express themselves. So the family's reaction is even worse off than I've described, especially when the ultimate happens and a kid who is depressed commits suicide. And so this is the reason why I brought this. This is one thing that I've seen in my practice. It's serious events, which in the past, you never see kids, committing suicide. Over the last couple of years, this has become a national emergency. Next slide. Next slide. So my objectives here is for school counselors to have a high index of suspicion for depression. Here, the object in the rear mirror can actually be farther, but it can be closer than you think. For school counselors to be able to be comfortable with making a diagnosis and to be sure of their diagnosis, to monitor the kid when is diagnosed with depression and to know their limitation, anticipate suicide when depression is worsening. Early intervention is the key. Of course, you guys are great counselors, so you provide counseling, but you have to recommend, you have to step up to the plate and recommend high level of intervention when counseling fails. If a teacher comes to your office and says, we have this kid, we don't know what's going on, it's not behaving the right way. I want everyone to always have depression at the back of their mind. Next slide. So the processes involved, the need to assess risk, build hope and reasons for living, connect and strengthen connections with protective adults, and develop a safety plan. So that's the ABCD of depression. It also happens to be the ABCD of suicide. We need to assess the risk. Is this kid able to stay within the environment? Does it need hospitalization? Then we build hope, because it's important to build hope in a hopeless kid and give him reasons for living. We also have to connect to the kids, and we have to strengthen connections with protective adults. The bigger deal, however, is to develop a safety plan. Next slide. See this kid here, 9-year-old who committed suicide in 2010. See him, his face is filled with smiles. And that's the problem with children. They are depressed and they are still smiling. And it's very difficult to make a diagnosis because they don't tell you what is going on. And what you see is a happy kid who sometimes puts up a show on the facial outlook. Jason Lance dropped off his son, Montana, at Stewart's Creek Elementary School in Texas in 2010. And the worst thing that can happen, this is what every kid, you know, every parent fears. They get that call from school that something bad is happening to their kid. This kid was dropped. He gave his father a kiss and a hug, not knowing it was the last kiss and the last hug. He was found hiding in the nurse's bathroom. He had committed suicide by hanging himself in the nurse's bathroom. So this is a picture which haunted me for a while. And this is the reason why I brought this, that school counselors must agitate themselves into action and always look beyond what you see. Have a high index of suspicion. All that glitters may not be gold. Next slide. So the most feared events in depression, regardless of age, is suicide. In our field, suicide is cancer, is the cancer of our field. And that's the job. We don't make our money until we start to prevent suicide. And over the last 10 to 15 years, I'd like to tell you that youth depression has increased enormously. You know, I've seen quite a lot in my practice. When I was in training, they used to tell us that depression in kids is like 1 to 2% of children, and that it's 4 to 8% in older children and adolescents. And in adults, it's about 6 to 9%. See, the figures in children is smaller. Nobody even imagines that a kid has any reason to be depressed, but they do get depressed. We just don't know. It's underreported and underdiagnosed. And that's the reason why I brought this. Depression is not only a great pretender, it's a great mystery. And it's very mysterious, and it's a lethal killer, especially in our children. They are supposed to bury us. It's sad if we have to bury them. So it starts at 1 to 2%, small level, small value. It goes to 4 to 8% in children and adolescents. And by the time it gets to adult level, it's like 6 to 9%. This was the value 10, 20 years ago. I'll show you the values now. The values now are skyrocketed. Next slide. In preschool children also, 10, 20 years ago, you expect in community samples, 0.3% depression. In clinic samples, 0.9% depression. In clinic sample in school-age children. And depression always occurs in school-age children in the same frequency in boys and girls. Some of it actually indicates a high value in boys, but as they approach adolescence, it goes to about 4 to 8%, and it's about 2 to 3 times more likely in females than males. So it starts with a higher representation in boys, but as it goes into the adolescent age group, the female number outstrips the male numbers. And there's nothing that is more heritable than depression. Children with a family history of depression are about 3 times more likely to develop depression than those without. Next slide. No, so those are the old values. Over the last 2-3 years, new values have popped up. in our country. Looking at the 2016-2019 survey of the National Survey of Children Youth, they came up with an estimated prevalence of 4.4%. This is a lot more than the 0.3 and 0.4%, which I had earlier presented, which were the values so many years ago. The values has increased to 4.4%. And when you look at the 4.4%, 3.4% of that population, unlike the 0.3% and the 0.4%, 3.4% of them had current depression. And even there's some data that indicates that these values are underdiagnosed and underreported. Many people, many researchers, many authorities actually believe that this 4.4% is less than what currently occurs in school, in community, and in clinic settings. Now, if you look at the 2018 to 2019 National Survey of Drug Use and Health, in 12 to 17-year-old, look at the value. 20.9% have had history of major depression, and 15.1% had major depression in the past year. Can you just imagine? The adult value is 6 to 9%. The adolescent value is supposed to be 4 to 8%. But we are now reporting a value of 20.9% in 12 to 17-year-old, and 15.1% have had depression in the past year. And so this values actually tells you why I'm passionate about this presentation. And I really think that in anything we do, depression has to be on top of our diagnosis in children. We got to look for it. When we look for it, we find it. If we don't look for it, we will never find it. Most of these values are actually underreported and they're underrepresented. In children, nobody talks about them. They are the hidden population. Nobody reports them. Nobody fights for them. And they can't fight for themselves. They can't call their legislators. So it behoves us, wonderful counselors and teachers, to be able to fight for these kids and help them so that none of them ends up like Montana. So if you look at this value from the youth risk, the youth risk behavior survey of 2019, high school children came up with a data of 36.7%, 36.7% with depression, especially in the 14 to 18-year age group. They experience persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness during the past year. Look at the numbers. There's an explosion of data over the last 3 or 4 years. 4.4% in children, 3.4% current depression, 20.9% in the 12 to 17-year-old group, and 36.7% in the 14 to 18-year-old group. And the girls, the number went up to almost 50%. The value before me is 46.6%. It's surpassed adult values of 6 to 9%. Next slide. So the depression in minority population is a different event. It's likely underreported, like I said, due to lack of high quality studies. They are misdiagnosed most of the time. You know, what we need to be very careful about is to say, oh, don't worry. Oh, nothing is wrong with you. Oh, you're going to be okay. No, they're not going to be okay, you know, because they're depressed, and you won't know until you talk to them. Sit down and talk to them. Spend a lunch time with these kids, and you'll be surprised what you will find. So we misdiagnose them. Some of them don't have any insurance. Poverty is a problem, and poor access to care. Also, absence of minority providers who are passionate enough to spend extra time with these kids and help them is a problem, is a huge problem. So in minority population, it doesn't matter whether you are Asian, Black, Hispanic, depression is severe. Their depression is much, much severe due to late diagnosis. Is that a late diagnosis or no diagnosis? And you know what? When a minority kid kills himself, nobody hears about it. Nobody reports it. So most of the suicide from minority depression are not even underreported. They are not reported. We don't have data on those. Next slide. So what are the causes of depression? It's multifactorial. There's no single cause of depression. You have environmental stress and adverse events. These are huge significant factors. The heritability of depression is only 40 to 50%. But that's not only, that's huge, because it means if you have a patient whose parents are depressed, there's a 50% possibility that the kid will be depressed. That's huge. If a parent killed themselves, there is 3 to 6 times possibility that that patient will be depressed. That little boy or little girl will be depressed, and his life may end up in suicide. So suicide and depression in family is a huge problem. And, you know, with the current economic issues, divorces, the onslaught of drugs from everywhere, it's not only from Mexico. The drugs are from everywhere. You find drugs everywhere. It's crazy. My patients tell me you can find it wherever you want it. So that's a problem. Next slide. So neglect is a problem. Of course, if parents are using drugs and they don't have a job and things are terrible for them, they will neglect the child. It makes a lot of sense. Lack of parental values on. So that can be a problem. Parental illness, whether mental or physical, can lead to depression in kids. Oh my gosh, bullying. Oh, bullying is a problem. It's a huge problem. You know, these kids, I've spent tons of time with them when I was in school, watching them through my residency. And even now, I go to school and just watch them on the playground, see what they do. Oh, you can't be like us. Oh, you stupid. You stupid. You look at you. You don't even know what is wrong with you. They say unbelievable things to them that in my generation, we don't even say what. I don't think we said that to any kid when we were young. But the kids now, oh my gosh, they would chew each other up and spit them up. It's unbelievable. The carnage happening in those playgrounds. Peer pressure, of course. Failing grades. If my grades are bad and my mom is going to be upset with me, I'll be depressed. But the gay and lesbian population, they are picked on constantly. Anybody that comes out of the closet is going to be ruined. And the high incidence of depression among that population, almost in some studies up to 30 or 40%, is remarkable. Community pressure in audiovisuals. We have to talk to our patients. School counselors need to spend time talking to patients, talking to the kids to find out what they watch. The cartoons are spliced with depressive themes. I'm sad, I'm in a dark place, maybe I should kill myself. It's in cartoons and video games. You know, social media is filled with it. And what about the insult? They teach people how to insult each other. We found mischievous cartoons that give instructions to kids on YouTube about how to kill themselves. This is very remarkable, what is happening in the community. And it's very saddening. Also, when kids witness trauma, especially school shooting, which I'll talk about in a minute, that causes a high degree of depression. Next slide. Sexual and physical abuse at home. Of course, if that is happening, it's a possibility that depression could be a problem. Community violence. If they're shooting in my community every day, I'll be depressed. I won't like it. They won't say nothing. The kids don't say nothing. They don't talk about it. It is our jobs to help them to talk about it and to find out how they feel, how this is making them feel, so that we can get behind the screen and understand what is bugging them. Family chaos and dysregulation, poor relationship instability, parental non-availability, of course, parental use or battle with undiagnosed mental illness, to live with a bipolar mother. Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. Well, I'd rather live with a bipolar mother than to live with a borderline mother, because she says, go out there, take some cookies, give it to your friends. Then you come home and you say, why did you give those cookies? I never said that. I never said nothing about it. And that really drives these kids into depression. Loss of a parent or sibling, change of school environment. When I moved to Northeast Pennsylvania from New York, I told my daughter, I said, you know what? I'm not moving. Because incidentally, before we moved from the Bronx, like almost 1 or 2% of our friends had been depressed. And so when we moved to Northeast Pennsylvania, I gave my word, because I haven't been part of the United States Army. I'd moved throughout all my life, and I'd moved all my family members with that. But when I finally got there, even though I wasn't happy with some of the job situations that I found myself, I told my daughter, I said, I will not move. So we were stuck, and, I was stuck, but she wasn't stuck, because she was happy that I'm not moving out to a different location. So we have to also talk about that with our kids. If they're moving, that could be a problem. That could be a huge cause, because they lose loved objects, they lose friends, they're in a different environment that they know nothing about. So that's a problem. Loss of grandparents, especially if the grandparent is the sole caregiver, that's a problem. The grandfather that taught me how to fish, I would never like him to die. So these are the things we have to talk to our patients about. And of course, loss of boyfriends or girlfriends. I've seen cases that a boyfriend left the school, but she wasn't a boyfriend. She was just an imagined boyfriend, and she was depressed about it. So you have to ask, if this boyfriend that you said you lost, is it a real one or an imagined one? Because he left, but she was in love with him. It was just an imagination, and she was depressed about it. And of course, I've talked about borderlines, racing borderlines. That's a problem that can cause a whole lot of depression. Next slide. So how do we make the diagnosis of depression? And I know we all know how to make diagnosis of depression, but I want to, just kind of splice this into this presentation so that I can remind all of us how to do so. And I know we know how to do it. I use the DSM-5 is the book, which indicates that within a 2-week period, there are primary symptoms, there are secondary symptoms. The primary symptoms is depression or anhedonia, loss of interest or pleasure. Now, here is where we all go wrong when it comes to depression. We always think a person that is depressed has to be sad. No, you don't have to be sad. You don't have to be sad to be depressed. All you need is one of the primary symptoms. If you have a sad mood, it's icing on the cake. But what you find in kids is not sad mood. What you find is anhedonia, loss of interest and pleasure. And it fits into the DSM-4 criteria because you only need one. You need depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure in order to make a diagnosis of depression. You don't need both. So I want to help us to understand that we don't look for depressed mood. You may not find it. The kids may not know they're depressed. They may not know they're sad. So that may be a problem. The next slide. So we have, secondary symptoms, and you need 4 of these: appetite, weight changes, sleep difficulties, psychomotor retardation, agitation, fatigue, loss of energy, diminished ability to think or concentrate, and feelings of worthlessness, excessive guilt, and suicidality. Next slide. There has to be social and occupational dysfunction, so the kid may not be doing well in school. So that's maybe a problem. And we have to roll out medical courses and drug use. Next slide. And depression is a very complex, challenging issue, and it's a treatable condition. You may easily see it if you look for it. That's the essence of my presentation today. You may see it if you look for it. If you don't look for it, you won't see it. Next slide. So look at this kid be in the locker room in a dark place. This is not what you find. You don't find this in children and adolescents. This is what we think we should find, but this is not always what it looks like. I want to quickly show you what depression looks like in children and in adolescents. Next slide. Because the developmental stage at presentation is variable. Children may not articulate their feelings, and they may not be precise about the timing and the length of their symptoms. Next slide. Sometimes I've seen cases which really throws a wedge into your diagnosis. They're hearing voices, and you think they're psychotic. They're not psychotic, because a mood congruent auditory hallucination is a common thing in children and adolescents with depression. It's not psychotic. The difference is that when a kid says, I'm hearing voices, the voices are not conversing with each other. They're not making commentaries about each other. Because when you have a voice that is argumentative, that is commenting and conversing with each other, that's a sine qua non of the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Depressive hallucination is mainly a voice speaking to someone from outside the head with derogatory or suicidal content. The delusions are primarily on guilt, inadequacy, and persecution. There's no auditory hallucination with voices talking to each other, commenting on each other's, running commentary on someone's actions. That's, if you find that is psychosis. That may be a case of schizophrenia. So symptoms may be other somatic symptoms, which also occurs in children and adolescents with withdrawal, lung affect, sad affect, and poor self-esteem. Next slide. So in older kids, here is what you find most of the time. You find conduct-related manifestations, stealing. I've seen a whole lot of my patients who will shoplift. They shoplift, they're depressed. Talk to them. I've seen some driving impulsively, speeding, making wrong decisions, running red lights. Sit with them and talk with them. They're depressed. I've seen them drinking. One happened here. He was drunk, and then he gave another drunk friend, a lift. So you have two drunk boys in the car driving, and one died. And when I spoke with the one that was living, mom just left the father, girlfriend left him, is failing in school, and he didn't feel life is a place that is worth living. The next thing is he tasted a bit of alcohol, and he saw that it made him feel a bit better. So he became a chronic drinker. The next thing is to get behind the steering and do unbelievable things. So that's a problem. Following the wrong peer group can be a manifestation of depression. Next slide. Promiscuous sex, they call it friends with benefits, or one-night stands. If you speak with them, they may be depressed. They try to fit excessively into their peer groups, daring behaviors. They say, when you see a kid in school that just suddenly change their dressing pattern, depression may be the problem, not schizophrenia. Skipping classes, skipping school, skipping meals may be a problem. Next slide. Sleeping excessively during the day. Most kids will not sleep excessively during the day. If you see a kid who is sleeping during the day, he may have anhedonia. Talk to them. Extreme tiredness, avoidance of sports, anger. Anger is depression turned inwards. So if you see anybody who is exhibiting angry feelings, they may be depressed. Learning issues, falling grades and all that may be a problem. Especially when the kid is bright and he starts to fail, he may be depressed. Next slide. Of course, refusal to do activities of daily living, shaving, grooming, being late to classes in school, it's maybe a manifestation of depression. The worst is self-harm behaviors. They start to cut and they start to do things that would jeopardize their lives. So that's in the teenage age group. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. In the younger age groups, what you find is different. You find increasing evidence for defiant behaviors, are very oppositional. They jump right down your throat. You can, if you say one thing, they said 20. They will berate you. They will disrespect you. They will come out to tackle you. They can be aggressive. They could come up with non-conforming behaviors. So that happens in, younger kids. Anytime you have a kid with a change in pre-existing behaviors, always think about depression. Next slide. When they're too quiet, isolated from everyone, being loud and aggressive, hyperactive, can't sit still or focus, late submitting assignments, you have to talk to them, they may be depressed. Next slide. So here, we have to be careful about the diagnosis of dysthymia, because most of the time, this offers a challenging pitfall in diagnosis. Dysthymia, otherwise known as the persistent depressive disorder, can present like depression. But here, they have depressed or irritable mood most of the day. But so they can come up with being irritable and not depressed. Most of the time, what you see in kids is irritability. You don't see depression. You don't see a depressed mood. So, but DSM-5 agrees that it can be a depressed mood or irritable mood. And so you have one of that. The duration is 1 year or more. And you have 2 of the secondary symptoms of depression instead of 5. Next slide. So, go back to the children's rating scale. Can you go back? Yeah, the next one after this. Yes, the children rating scales is useful in diagnosis, and it's a 17-item instrument, and it's given separately to the children and adolescents versus the parents. When you have a key score, 40, they have moderate depression. If they have anything over 45, they have severe depression. That's how to monitor and maintain. This can be used for monitoring. It can be used for diagnosis. It can also be used for maintenance. Next slide. Okay, now I'm quickly going to go to this. I think I still have some time. School shootings has been a problem over the last 10 years, since 1999, when we had the Columbine shooting. We've had more than 356,000 kids who have experienced gun violence since then. You can imagine how traumatized our children are just for going to school. Going to school has become a battleground. It become a battlefield. And since Columbine, there have been 386 school shootings. 2022 was such a terrible year. There were 46 school shootings, 46 more school. There were 46 more school shootings than any year. 46 more than any year in 2022. Next slide. So the Meningay and Goldblatt, they came with a psychoanalytic interpretation of suicide, and they came up with a psychoanalytic suicide trial. So when someone kills themselves, tries to kill themselves, 3 wishes are being introduced. One is the wish to die. The other one, that's the destructive element, because most of us will think only one wish is being expressed. No, there is a wish to die. That's the destructive element. There is a wish to kill. That's the aggressive element. And there is a wish to be killed. That's a submissive element. Some of those kids, they know that they're going to be shut down in school. They're depressed, so they go there with a gun. They want to be killed. They not only want to kill others, they know that the cops are going to kill them. So we have to have a high index of suspicion in kids who are talking about threats, who are making threats, who are dressing differently, who are writing things on on social media. What I found is that you have kids writing that they're going to come and shoot the school down on social media, and we still allow it to happen. So we have to have a higher index of suspicion. And in common days, no suicide occurs without at least 3 elements in play. Next slide. So suicide is a huge, vast area. And if I might maybe come back and talk about this, but I'm going to quickly go through it. So I've talked about depression, but I can't talk about depression without talking about suicide. Over the last 10, 15 years, depression have assumed a severe public health concern. Also, suicide accompanies it, and suicide in our country has become a serious public health issue. And suicide is the act of intentionally causing one's death. The report published by the CDC in 2019 discovered that between 2007 and 2017, the rate of suicide in Americans ages 10 to 24 who died by suicide rose by 56%, 5 and 6. Can you imagine that? It went from 6.8 per 100,000 to 11, well, 10.6 or 11 per 100,000. That's an explosion. Yeah, that's an explosion. So the next slide. Based on the recent, no, go back. So unfortunately, suicide, because of this value, it went from 6.6 to 11. Because of this, suicide rose from number 3 cause of death in the age 10 to 24 to the second cause of death. And it constitutes 14% of all deaths in this age group. And with the pandemic, these values are going worse. It's worse. In fact, in 2002 to 2021, 136 reported suicide occurred among 5 to 9-year-olds. That's a group in which we never see suicide. In the field here, we never see suicide in the 5 to 9-year-old, maybe 1 or 2. We're now seeing suicide in the 3-year-old group and the 5 to 9-year-old group. This is crazy. Next slide. So I brought this study because I will explain it to you. Depressed patients, depressed kids, they have more access to firearms. Listen, no death will occur in depressed patients, except they will hang themselves and shoot themselves when they drink poison. Our healthcare system is still very smart, and we're able to save majority of those. But when they use firearms, is the ultimate lethal event. Now, 23% of people who have firearms, listen to this, 23% of teens who had access to firearms reported recent history of depression and suicide. And 27% of this group had access to firearms, compared to 20% of their peers without any mental health concern. So what it means is that in our children, those who are depressed and suicidal had more access to firearms than the counterparts who were not depressed and suicidal. So that's a problem. When depressed kids have more access to guns, so it's left for us to go into the field and help reduce this. Next slide. Males have more attempts than females. Most typical method is firearms. 2/3 of boys and half of girls are the one using firearms. Second most difficult to prevent is hanging. 1/4 of girls will use drugs and toxic agents. While rare in younger than 10 years age group, depression rates has markedly increased. The suicide rate has markedly increased. And you see that in the next slide. Next slide. Okay, look at this slide. Okay, sorry, we're almost getting there. In this slide, that's the 10 to 14-year age group. What you see in 2001 to 2007, look at this graph. There were 1.3 deaths in 100,000. You know, so that's a reduction in 2001 to 2007. And by 2021, the homicide reduced from 0.9 to 0.7, but it doubled. So if you look at the graph, the blue is depression. The green is depression. The blue is homicide. Look at the homicide rate. The homicide rate is going down, but it went up in 2019 to 2001. Look at the suicide, it's rising, and it even jumped up between 17 and 21. So both homicides and suicide went up in this population. So, and I'll tell you the reason in a minute. Next slide. If you look at this slide, this is for the next age group, 15 to 9 age group. Within 2001 to 2006, if you look at that, 2001 to 2006, see, both depression and suicide went up. But in 2006 to 2014, if you look at, they both went down, they crossed each other here. And in 2021 alone, this age group had a 91% increase in suicide. So next slide. Okay, so why do we have this? The year 2007 to 2017 is particularly a problem for depression and suicide. If you look at this graph, the millennials are anyone born from 1991 to 1996. So those are people between 27 to 42 years old, between 27 to 42 years old. Generation Z, those are the Zoomers. They are born between 1997 to 2012. So they're 11 to 26 years old. Then the Generation Alpha is anyone born from 2013 to 2024. They are less than 10 years old. We have noticed a generational shift in suicide and homicide. That's why I brought this graph. See, the millennials are having children. Those are people born between 1981 and 1996. And they are bringing the Zoomers and the Generation Alpha. So the millennials are struggling. They are labeled the generation in despair. And you'll see that these millennials, they are, regardless of their education, they don't find jobs. They can't find jobs. They live in dead-end, they're in dead-end jobs. If you talk to them, they will tell you they are not satisfied. They are not marrying. If they're good getting married, they're going to marriage later. They delay marriage, and when you delay marriage, you lose the protective effect of marriage on depression. Now, we now had influx of drugs beginning from about 2019. A large deposit of opiates and fentanyl came into this country. And guess who is using them? Millennials. Because they are very unsatisfied. And see, that little thing that I showed you, which is an explosion of suicide and homicide in the generation 10 to 15-year-old and 10 to 24-year-old. Those are children of millennials, the Zoomers and the Generation Alpha. And if you look at them, it's because, they're stoned on drugs. Grandparents are raising their kids. They don't have money. They don't have a good job. They are living in their parents' basement. They have nowhere to go. Depression is huge amongst them. Between 2007 to 2017, drug-related deaths among millennials went up 108%. 108%. And suicide went up 35%. And these are the children. Those are the people raising children. So that's why we have this generational shift in depression and also in suicide. Next slide. Also, I must also say that some of them who had good jobs, when there was a recession in 2008, many of them lost their jobs and they never were able to regain some of those jobs. So the result is poverty and unhappiness and misery. And yet they still have to raise their kids and they find it tremendously difficult. Now, the impact of social media, I must not forget that. There is a lot of adulteration in social media, cartoons, depressive themes. Suicide instructions actually are being given in I saw one YouTube exercise which I want. Can you give me that YouTube thing? Which next slide, it's in the next slide if you will play it for them. No, that's, go back to the YouTube, the other one, yes, this one, this slide, it just plays. I hope it will speak out loud.
And here is yet another video with a suicide clip spliced in at 4 minutes and 44 seconds.
Remember, kids, sideways for attention, long ways for results. End it.
This is just.
Anyone want to argue that it's not happening? Anybody? And here is yet another video.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bob. I'm sure people were able to watch it. These are what some of our kids, the Zoomers and the Generation Alpha, this is what they are watching. He said, sideways for attention, longitudinally, straight up to end it. And that is something that was found on YouTube. So you have to ask the kids in school, what are they watching? You have to educate and build a relationship with their parents to help them know that their suicidal intentions in the YouTube, in most of the TikTok, all these are laced into those conversations and kids were watching them. This one was a kid who was watching this. Mom, the kid was watching it at a nosebleed and the mom rushed to the side of the kid. And this was what she found a kid watching. So watch out for suicide. Watch out for non-suicidal self-injury cuttings. The cutters are also becoming very common. 17 to 18% of adolescents, have either cut themselves, self-inflicted with burning, or they also have had various forms of suicide attempts. So this is also something that we have to be asking the kids. Next slide. Okay. All right. So let's calm down. I know I've bored you with all these miserable things I'm talking about. Please permit me to relax a bit. All my kids, none of them wanted to come out. The boys, they won't come out. They just wanted to stay in mom's belly. It's a protective place to be. So I thought about it last night. I said, if I was a kid today, I would never want to come out. I just want to stay in my mom's belly and just stay there. The demands are too, I mean, it's a safe place to be. I love mothers. They are wonderful. Thanks to all the mothers. Shout out to all the mothers. You're beautiful and wonderful. So, but if I was a kid, I would hold up in my mom's belly for as long as I can be, because I don't want to face the bullying, environmental, social stress, peer pressure in school, challenges in writing, reading difficulties. They're pushing people to do standardized testing. It's like, keep moving, move it. The teaching is less now. Nobody cares whether I'm struggling or not. They just push it. So this is just to say that, you know, if I'm a kid here, so this kid is telling his mom, stop it. I'm not yet ready to come out. Next slide. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this. The prognosis for depression is good. It's a treatable situation, but it can be highly recurrent. If someone has had one depression, the likelihood that they will have a second one is about 20 to 60%. If someone has had a second depression, the possibility that they will have a second episode is about 90%. But the good thing about depression, why we have to do more for these kids, is 90% recover from a first episode of moderate to severe depression within 1 to 2 years. Next slide. The younger they are in diagnosis, the more chronic and the more difficult it becomes to treat. Montana, that I showed you at the beginning, had been depressed and nobody knew about it. All they saw was ADHD, was hyperactive, but he had been depressed. And so when you see kids who have neuroplasticity disorders and hyperactivity and autism, the high index of depression amongst those people should alert you to look further. So 33% of patients will develop bipolar and 48% will develop bipolar 2. Next slide. Okay, CBT is great. I know you all know how to do it. Family therapy, CBT, fantastic. Interpersonal relationship is good. Interpersonal therapy is good. Anyone, just use any. Just help them. You guys are fantastic. You know how to do it. You know, but the most important thing is to diagnose them, pick them out of a crowd. Next slide. Okay. This is probably coming to the end. Start a conversation with kids about how to recognize mental health distress. This is one of the big reasons why I brought this out. Help them to have better coping strategies and foster resilience. We all have to be vigilant. Suicide and depression is killing our kids. It's not our fault, but it's killing our kids. We have to be vigilant because depression looks extremely different in younger kids and even more different in adolescents. If a child is upset, parents and counselors should ask them questions about what is going on. Don't forget what is going on at home. Home is the key to your diagnosis. Next, we shouldn't talk kids out of their feelings. Oh, no, you shouldn't feel that way. No. Well, you know, boys don't cry. Well, boys cry. Boys must cry because if they don't cry, they hold it in. It becomes an angry feeling turned inside, and what's going to happen is going to come out. Wishes are going to seek fulfillment, and one day, bad things are going to happen. Come up with a plan on how to help the children. There are ways in which we have new softwares now that are picking up depression in children. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. We've come up with this universal screening because of the increase that any children over 12 years must receive universal screening for depression. And if they are less than 12, they should be screened as well if it's clinically indicated. Next slide. Okay, the Go Behavior Beacon, and people should research into this. This software captures keywords and phrases that might indicate a child is thinking about suicide. It's called the Go Guardian Beacon. I think this would be a fantastic investment for schools. Some people don't like it. They said it's invasive. You have to talk about that with your school. You know, but we have discovered this Go Guardian Beacon. It's a software. It catches the phrase words and phrases that might indicate a child is thinking about suicide. The good behavior game. If you want to play video game, play the good behavior game, not people shooting and killing each other. A behavior management is what this indicates, and it helps them in a team-oriented fashion to reduce the pressure and help them to come up with what is bothering them. So everybody can talk about it. And when they're talking about it, you can pick the ones that are depressed. Next slide. Oh, the plan is to have a high index of suspicion. Depression is not only a great pretender, it is a lethal killer of our children. Listen, I'm passionate about this one topic I'm passionate about, and you could see that I'm almost screaming, talking about it. We better catch them before we lose them. You know, ensure that we distinguish between depression, between suicide and dysthymia. And we have to distinguish them from other common things. Please, to tell them what they are feeling and to shut them down, it's not the right thing. Encourage them, let them talk, let them become as talkative as I am, and you will find it. Next slide. Thank you very much for listening to all I got to say. The New York, the New York State School Counselor Association, I thank you a lot for listening to what I got to say. And I hope that some of these things will become standards in your school. Thank you indeed very much for giving me the opportunity.
Dr. O, I appreciate you. I tell you, I'm like, wow. I'm like, wow. I mean, this is some really great stuff that our counselors can use. Thank you, counselors, for listening. Do we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, Bob?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just looking in the chat to see if there is anything right now.
Or did he mesmerize everybody by what he was saying?
I don't see any questions in the chat right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Cool.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Dr. O, I thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
It was very informative, very enlightening. Counselors will have a lot to look at, and your passion about what you do is fantastic. I try to instill that in school counselors as well, that if you're passionate about something, you will be able to get the job done. But I just want to tell you a little tidbit, Dr. O.
Yes.
We as school counselors, we do not diagnose, but we do most of the stuff where you're talking about, talking to our children, talking to our students rather, listening to them. And then if we feel that there's something more, then we would make a referral. So I thank you for that. And I'm quite sure our counselors will take what you have said and put it into their practice. Before I let you go, I need to have a word from our president, Ms. Marjorie Miller.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. O. I was typing in the chat, so forgive me for the delay. I have to say it was kismet, because today I had a training in suicide prevention. I'm a middle school counselor in Queens, and it was good. A lot of facts, a lot of details, but what you did in an hour, I did not get that passion, that those tools that I need as a counselor that you gave me in 1 hour. And I think I speak for many of us here listening to your presentation. It was just right on the mark. And again, to all of you, all the students and school counselors that are on, that were lucky enough to hear this Zoom. This is what NYSSCA does. We find these resources for you so that you can go back to your school tomorrow with ideas and thoughts and looking at things a little bit differently and being the support that your students need. So thank you so much, Dr. O.
Thank you.
Popped in. Is there a way to turnkey this for my department? If you wanted to show the video to your department, it's going to be it's on our YouTube channel right now. So that could work, and we're going to share the PowerPoint tomorrow. And the question goes, what do you think about young athletes in depression? They have a lot of pressure on themselves, and it just moved against it. And how can we help them with the depression? I often find we often underestimate athletes and the emotions they go through. Exactly.
Yes, thank you for that question. Being an athlete is one of the most difficult things that a kid will do. And quite often they are under tremendous pressure to combine assignments. They have to do well in their school in order for them to be involved in any form of, basketball, football, or anything. That puts them under tremendous pressure. I think they must have a therapist that talks to them. And I think the guidance, the school counselor must have a liaison with the coach. Talk to the coach. A coach who knows his kid very well will tell you what is going on. I will not allow a coach to coach my son if he doesn't talk to my son. And quite often, sometimes talking to the coach can be helpful. Also, knowing the peers. If a basketball team, 10 of them, talking around them, being at the game, watching how they relate to each other will help take the pressure out. I don't know, it's good to excel in school and excel in sports, but sometimes you have good athletes who don't do well in school. And because I have one like that, he didn't do well in school, but is a good athlete. And when he failed one of his subjects, they chuck him out of the basketball team and he became depressed and suicidal. So that's something that we have to discuss with the principal. I'm not saying that they should have a different level of expectation, but sometimes just talking about this and talking around the topic can go a long way in helping preserve the lives of our kids. So that's what I can think about now. And I hope I've answered that question up to the best of my ability. I think just talking about it, relating to the coach, relating to the peers, forming a liaison with the school, kind of finding an easy way in between school, in between sports will take the stress of the kids who want to excel in school and also excel in sports. Talking about it is maybe what you have here that will open everything up to preserve the life of the kids.
Well, Dr. O, I was on mute, so you didn't get a chance to hear me. I thank you for your presentation. Someone wrote, they said, thank you, you're a wise man. They said, I love the coach aspect, and yes, spreading awareness goes a long way. Thanks so much. So, Dr. O, again, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informational. It was very inspiring. So again, thank you. I just want to give a shout out to my members I see Michael Gardner is on. I saw Sharon Usher, and I saw one of our previous board members, Gloria Jean, that was on earlier. Sharon was on last week. I think she was on this evening as well. These are professional development committee members. And I'm just happy that we're able to do this. Real quick, Michael, do you have anything you want to say? I see some of my students. Brianna, I'll see you guys at 7. Again, thank you. I think we're going to send out a survey later on. I think Michael will send out a survey. Again, everyone, thank you. Be blessed and stay tuned. And don't forget that we're having our conference in November. Please log on to NYSSCA.org so that you can sign up. And we hope to see each and every one of you at our conference. Bob, anything?